Scanning is much, much better than photographing because you have the same surface. It's going to be the same distance away all the time. The lights are consistent. Just as a way to, I'm trying to open up my scanner. Here's my scanner here. No, that's not my scanner. This is my scanner. I happen to have a 9000F Mark II flatbed scanner. If you have options on your scanner to scan your stuff, then photograph is ideal for drawings because you want it to be scanned at the best possible resolution. I'm going to go ahead and put a drawing in my scanner. My scanner is pretty big, but if your drawings are bigger than your scanner, I'll go over the whole idea of Photoshop, using Photoshop to scan multiple images. Okay, so I'm going to scan this drawing right here. As you can see, is pretty big. It's on 9x12. My scanner could probably fit the whole thing, but to be on the safe side, I'll scan it in 2 parts. So if you need to check your settings on your scanner, right now I have it set for image quality high. I don't really need it to do this PDF. I'm not scanning it as a PDF, but that's the document. I'm scanning it as a TIFF for photos and drawings. And that is recommended because the TIFF is lossless. It's a lossless formatting, which means that it does not drop data. JPEGs are called lossy because they do drop data. So when you're scanning it for something that you're going to potentially keep and put in your portfolio at some point, you might as well scan it right the first time. So we're not going to do a PDF. I'm going to do a TIFF. And that's fine. The data format is auto. In my particular case, it saves to documents. I'm going to open it with Photoshop. You can open it with other things. That's the auto scan. Now for photo scan, 600 DPI, full color. It's a drawing. Data format is TIFF. It's going to scan it into, I should have it scan it into, I'm going to make a new file. And everybody's print is going to be different, but you're going to essentially, wait, I don't want to put it there. I'll put it here. It's essentially the same stuff. So you got to poke around at your scanner until you find the settings where you can change the resolution and the document type. No, not doc, scan drawing. Okay, so I'm going to create a new folder called Scan Drawing. Okay, save it in Scan Drawing. Data format is TIFF. You say I have JPEG, PNG, or TIFF. TIFF is best. The settings for the TIFF are as they were before. And I'm going to send it to my Photoshop so it'll automatically open it up in Photoshop. I could just send it to a folder. I could attach it to email. I could have it not do anything in particular. There's lots of other things it can do. The documents are going to be 300 DPI. So notice the photo is color, and it's covering the full place, and it's 600 DPI. I'll explain DPI in a minute. Documents are grayscale, and they're 300 DPI. The custom scan you can set to whatever scan and stitch. This is what I'm going to be doing with Photoshop, but you can actually do it with your computer. Scan gear could be doing, I don't know, there's other things. You could do it as a document, as a auto scan. I think you mostly get documents, photos, and there's probably one other thing. Okay. That I can't remember off the top of my head. You need to scan it at least 300 dpi. You should. You could scan it at 150 and that would be okay. For really high quality artwork, you want to scan it at least 600. That's probably the top you can go. But as you can see, you can scan it at any of these. I do not recommend scanning it at 75 dpi because it's going to be useless for saving it for other things. You want to scan it at least 300. 200, very minimum. All right, so I've put my drawing in the scanner, and I'm going to scan it as a photo. Let it do its thing.
Wow, I hope you're recording this, are you?
I am.
Oh.
Okay, so that is one piece of the drawing. As you can see, it's half the drawing. All right, so I'm going to move the, just shift it over to get the top part of the drawing. So if your drawings are really tall, really big, you can do it several sections. I've done them as much as 6 to 8 sections for a really big drawing. I've actually scanned canvases, but my scanner has a adjustable hinge so that I can put large things like books under it. So I'm going to scan the other half of the drawing now. I'm going to cover how to put this in Photoshop. Okay, now I saved my 2 drawings as TIFFs. And I do that because TIFF is a better quality for images. And our drawings should be essentially as good as photos, right? So I'm going to open it with Photoshop. You can right-click on anything and make it open with a certain program. I am using a Mac, but that shouldn't hurt anything. It's taking a while, so I'm just going to drag it to my program here. Okay. There's my 2 pieces of my drawing. And we don't need the crop tool on. Uncrop. Okay. Now, you always, always, always have to take your images, your drawings, whatever you've done, you have to open them up in Photoshop before you do anything with them. Don't just save them as a PDF and then send them, because it might not be the right size, they might be rotated, they might be dark, they might be nasty in all kinds of ways, and you'll lose points because the presentation of your work is just as important as the work itself. Really good work presented poorly is going to look bad. And mediocre work, or just okay work presented really well, is going to look better. Really bad work presented badly is going to work even worse than that, going to look even worse than that. So I'll turn on the overhead again so that you can see. This is the original drawing. Now let's compare the original drawing to the scans. You can see that the original drawing is on white paper. It looks pretty white. The scan drawing looks a little yellow. And not only does it look a little yellow, but it looks yellower towards the center because of a shadow. So the first thing that we're going to do is rotate. No, actually, we don't have to do that first. The first thing we're going to do is put the 2 pieces together. So in Photoshop, you go under File, Automate, all the way down to Photo Merge. And I'm pretty sure it's the same on Photoshop CC. Go to Photo Merge, and when the computer gets around to it, it will give me the dialog box for photo merging. should be pretty much the same in both programs and all platforms. I'm going to add open files. It adds my 2 drawings. I'm going to blend the images together. Okay. So as long as you've got a reasonable amount of overlap in your sections of drawing that you've scanned, Photoshop can put the drawing together for you. Even if the drawings are crooked. I see one drawing was a little bit, one side of the drawing seems like it was a little crooked because you see how it goes off at an angle, but it looks pretty seamless. If I turn back on my tools here, you can see that this is how it put it together based on the pixels. So that's pretty cool. You can't really see where the seam is. So at this point, I will flatten it. That's layer, flatten image. Now I'm going to rotate it, and that's image, image rotation, 90 degrees clockwise. Now it's upright. The next thing I'm going to do is trim it, crop it. So I use my crop tool, which is this right here, and I don't want it to be custom. I want it to be unconstrained. Pull these things to the sides. Try to get a good framing of your drawing. So I don't need all this space at the top. And I don't need all this space at the bottom. And I don't want to show the edge of the paper anyway. So no, I don't want to turn it. I want to bring it. Come on. There we go. Okay. If it's crooked, you can straighten it out using this tool as well. But for now, we'll just trim it. It's a really big file, so it's really bogging down my system. Here's a thing that you should be extremely aware of when you're doing images in Photoshop. Okay, so now I've cropped it. And it's clean edges. There's no binder edges. There's no ripped paper. There's no background with a piece of carpet sticking out of it. It's very clean. This is a scan, of course. Okay, now looking at the top part of, I'll close these guys right here. Looking at the top of the menu bar on my Photoshop file, you can see that it says 18.5%. That means that this image is being displayed at 18% of its actual size. That's incredibly huge. I've got my rulers on. You should turn on your rulers, and you can do that with Control-R, or you can do View Rulers. Turn them on, turn them off. You should always have your rulers on when you're working in this. In addition to having your rulers on, there's 2 important things you need to know about size and resolution. If I were to change this to inches, which I can do by right-clicking and changing this to inches, it looks like an 8 by 11 inch drawing. If I were to print it, I would need to print it out at 600 dpi to get an 8 by 11 inch drawing. So under image size, you can see that at 600 dots per inch or pixels per inch, it is indeed an 8 by 11 drawing. However, it is nearly 5,000 pixels across and nearly 6,500 pixels tall, and it's 87 megabytes. That's way out of our range. So we don't want to leave it like this. We're not going to change it right now because I'm going to do a couple things to it first. You really want to have your pictures set at pixels. For anything you're doing on the computer, it should not be anything more than 72 dpi. The difference between 600 dpi and 72 dpi is huge. But first, before we start pulling, anytime we reduce the resolution or reduce the size or do any kind of change like that, you're going to remove data from your document. So we will lose data. So if we want to be able to, say, print this out or send it to a magazine or enter it in an art contest, we want a high-res image, we will need to keep it at 600. So I want to make sure I have a copy of it at 600. But before I do that, I also want to make sure that it's true to color. So if you look at, I got all this crap in the way, you can see the original drawing is pretty white. So I'm going to go under Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. If I pull all the saturation out, I'll get a black and white image, essentially. It's not totally this white. It's probably slightly cream colored, but for the sake of argument, I'm just going to make it white. Now the balance, comparing it again to my original, I want to see that the balance of lights and darks are true to my drawing, and they are in this case. So that's a good thing. Sometimes, one thing I did was I did scan this with another drawing behind it, but it didn't seem to show through, so that's good. Because if it had, you should always either take your drawing out of the book or put a piece of paper in between the pages so that you don't get a ghost of another drawing. Never draw on the back of the pages that you're going to be scanning and submitting either. If I needed to change the balance of lights to darks, then I would use Adjustment. I like to use, any of these will work, but I like to use Levels because that gives me more control. In my case, this is pretty well spread across the board, although highly concentrated in the white just because there's so much white on the background. I could pull this down a little and pull this up a little, and it will increase the contrast because I don't want to give a false impression of my drawing either. I want it to be accurate to what I actually did. And you can manipulate it in the middle too. So if for some reason you need to increase the contrast or lighten the contrast, you can do that. It looks like that it's still pretty close to my original drawing. And actually the webcam is a little paler. I'm looking at my actual drawing and it's pretty dark in here. It's much darker in here than it shows on the camera, on the webcam. It's dark like this. All right, so that's step 2, adjusting the contrast. Step 3 is we're going to save this as a high-res image for our own purposes because I want to keep a high-resolution copy. You may not want to, and maybe 600 dpi is just way too much. But it's a good way. It's also a good way to archive your work so that you don't get it mixed up with your schoolwork because you'll almost never turn anything in as a TIFF. So I am going to save this into my portfolio website. I'm going to put it into my drawings portfolio. Actually, I put it in 2018. And this portrait is Crystal. So I'm going to name it, save it, no compression. Now I've got a copy of it saved at its absolute highest resolution, which is also ginormous. Now I'm ready to make it ready to submit to my, and if you don't care about saving this stuff, you can save it. You can scan it at 300 or 200 dpi. You don't have to save an intermediate step. I'm just showing that for processing or for documenting your work, when you do a really good piece, you want to be able to save a really good image of it so you could put it, into a show or do a print of it or send it to a client or whatever. Okay, so next is going to be reducing the size. We go back to image. Notice we trimmed it, we cropped it in, got rid of the extra pixels first. Then we adjusted the balance, the color, and then we adjusted the contrast. Now we're going to adjust the size. So we'll go to image size. Because this is so large, and I'm going to take it down to 72, I'm going to take it down in 2 steps just to make sure that I don't lose too much data at once. So I'm going to change my resolution to 300. Now you may have started out with 300, and that's totally fine. Don't worry about the document width and height. Don't worry about the pixels. At this point, there's still plenty of pixels. Make sure you have constrained proportions or aspect ratio locked. These things should be locked, and however it shows up on your particular version of Photoshop, there's going to be some kind of a locking mechanism here between the height and the width. Okay, so we'll do that. Now it's showing at 18%, it's much smaller. So if I enlarge it, now it's showing it at, this is 50% of its actual size. And again, if I turn this back into inches, you can see it is 8 by 11 inches. So I haven't changed the dimensions of the drawing. I've only changed the number of pixels in every inch of the drawing. But pixels are important on computers and for doing website stuff and for doing anything you're going to send over the internet. It's not as important when you're printing it. You want more pixels when you're printing it, less pixels when you are displaying it on a computer screen, because it won't display at anything higher than 72 dpi, no matter what it is. Your monitors can have more and more pixels in them, and makes it tighter and tighter and tighter, but it's still essentially the same thing. I'm not super clear on the reasons for that. I just know that that's what it is. I'm sorry. I wish I could give you a better answer. So I'd say this still looks pretty good. I may want to do, just for presentation's sake, I may want to get rid of some of the schmutz along the edge here. The best way to do that is to use your stamp tool, your clone tool. So I can take a little clone of an area right nearby and cover over that little schmutzy bit on the side with the same stuff. I'm not erasing it or any of that. I'm just using a little piece of its own paper to cover over the places that look a little mucky. I could do that here because this looks like it was, I look at my drawing and there isn't a schmutz there. It's just on the scanner. It's just on the scan. So I'm going to take a little piece of that and, no, not like that, a little piece of that paper and just cover it. Okay. Minimal. You want to do this minimally because you don't want to change the quality of your drawing or the veracity, the truthfulness of your drawing. You want your drawing to be truthful. Okay. So it looks pretty good. It looks pretty, it's in focus, which scans always are, which is nice. So I'm going to go ahead and take it down to 72 dpi at this point. You don't have to step it down twice, but if you scan it really high like I did, you should take it down in 2 steps. If you scanned it at 150 or 200 or 300, you can do it in 1 step. So we go back to image size. We've got a resolution of 300, which most people are going to have. 300 is going to be a standard if it's a photograph. Turn that to 72. Now, once it's at 72, you can see that the pixels actually go down to 568 by 770. What's our limit? Most of the time they say 800 to 1,000. Since it's well under that, I'm going to go ahead and just make it 800, which brings this up a bit. I'm not adding or removing any data. I'm just adjusting the amount of data that's being taken out. So now it goes from a 21 megabyte file to a 1.3 megabyte file. I go, okay. Now, if I were to display this at 100%, which is a good thing to do here. Where is my 100%? I'm not seeing it. Anyway, you can do Control-0, or you can fit on screen. I'm just going to make it a little too big, 161. So I do Control-0, that puts it at 100%. Control-0, 100%. No, not going to do that for me. You suck. Huh. I don't know why it's doing that. So I'll just take it down by step. Okay, there it is, 100%. And looks like pretty much identical to my original drawing in most ways. It's even actually looks the same size because I think that my image is actually 7 by 10. So it did scan it exactly the same size. So it really still is 8 by 11 inches of drawing. It's just at 72 pixels per inch instead of 300 or 600 pixels per inch. Now this is ready to save for submission. So we're going to save as, and we're going to save it as a JPEG first. No matter what you're working on, you're going to want to save this as JPEG after you've saved your, my TIFF is for archiving purposes. My JPEG is going to be for my own purposes. So I'll put that in school. And I want to put that in this. So I don't have to change the name because I'm not saving it on top. It's a different thing. I'm not going to save it as a copy. I'm just going to save it as a JPEG. Not as a black and white, just as a JPEG. So say OK. You want it to be maximum as long as this little number here, which is the size the image is going to be once it's saved as a JPEG, isn't over 500. Because some of these, especially for the drawings, the files where you have to put like 30 drawings in a single PDF, you want each PDF to be only about 100 to 300 kilobytes in order to not overblow your PDF. So we're going to go ahead and save it as maximum, and that is my JPEG. I'll set that aside because I'm going to now do a version taking a photograph. And I know most of you are probably going to do it this way. Scanners are just superior quality for high resolution images. If you're going to photograph, you need to make sure that you are square on to your image. You see how my image looks keystoned? It's tilting in a little bit. If I'm looking at it from my point of view, it's tilting in a lot. But my brain says, oh, it's flat. But image-wise, it's actually tilted. That will make it distorted. So I'm actually looking at it more like this. So if you take a picture of your drawing like this, what you're doing is squashing the top of it in. You're distorting the proportions. If I don't know, if you have trimmed as you should, I might say it looks out of proportion. The hand is too big because the head is too small because everything is keyed down. It's distorted down. So you want to make sure that when you take your picture, you are 100% flat on square to that image. And the only way you can really do that effectively is to line it up with the edges of your camera. I'm not going to use this camera to take it because it is bending still a little bit because of there's a lot of reasons why it does that. The best thing to do is to take it out of the drawing pad and tape it to the wall. Take your camera, your cell phone, or whatever you're using, set to the camera, hold it square up to your image, and back it up enough so that you can see the edges. You should be able to see the edges all the way around, and it should be squared up, okay? The next thing you want to make sure that you do is have light coming from both sides. This is really important. Sometimes if you have light coming from only one side, you're going to get kind of a gradient. It goes gray at the bottom or gets washed out at the top. Or don't use a flash. Don't ever use a flash because that will make a white spot in the middle of your drawing. So you can see I've got light on both sides. You can see I've got two shadows. One light stronger than the other. Take two lamps or two clamp lights or two desk, anything, just to get the light coming from either side of you onto your drawing evenly across the page. Like I have one here and I have one here. Okay, so pretend like this is the wall because I'm not going to put it on the wall. I won't be able to show you what I'm doing. If you can do this on a tilted surface like this and make it work, that's fine. All I care about is that you center that drawing in your frame so that it's not distorted. You see? I've got it squared up inside my frame so that it's even all the way around. In a phone like this, you can actually hold in the middle to get a better variation of lights and darks. Okay. The other thing that you can do, see, I've got the flash off. I've got it on high resolution. If you have a hard time holding your hand steady, but it's on the wall, then I suggest take a chair, turn it backwards, put your elbows on the chair, like so. Say I was taking a picture of this on the wall. You can put this up, and you can actually mark the floor and the wall so that you can put it in the same place every time, and then just stabilize your hands so that they're steady, or use a tripod and get it squared up. Take the picture so it's totally square to the wall, to the drawing. All right. So I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it from here. I want to see the edges on purpose so that I can make sure it's square. Okay. I'm going to send that to my computer. Nope, it's not good enough. I want it to be totally square. That did not end up totally square, so I'm going to try it again. See, it'd be much easier to do this on the wall with my elbows balanced on the back of a chair. Okay. That looks pretty good. That's squared up within the frame. You can see it all the way around. So send that to myself. I can do that with AirDrop. You could email it. If you email it, make sure that you email it at full size, not at strange size. Okay. So now this is in downloads. And there's my drawing right there. This light on the left is too hot. You see how it's brighter on this side than it is on that side? Try to have the same light on both sides so that you don't get a hot spot. This is 2 megabytes. It's 3,000 by 4,000 pixels. It doesn't look quite so bad up close, but look at this. You can see right through the drawing to the back. There's another drawing back there. Not good. So I'm actually not going to photograph this drawing. After all, I am going to do the other drawing because there's no way to get rid of that ghosting. So I'm going to go ahead and photograph this drawing instead. And I will back this light off so it's not so close. Square to my camera. The light on either side. This is still a stronger light. You can see by the shadows. Now the shadows are closer. But they're not behind me, they're not above me. I'm not casting a shadow onto my drawing. If I see a blocked area like this, something like this on your screen, like an area that's obviously got your cell phone in it, I'm going to give you points off for it, okay? Because I don't want to see your phone in the image, okay? So we'll take a picture of this one here, square it up. If it's against the wall, it'd be a lot easier. That adjusts the light a little too much. So you see, I don't know if you can see it on the phone, but you see how I'm making it lighter and darker depending on where I try to put my focus. I want to get it so that I get a good range of value. If I do it right here, it's going to go all for the darks and I lose the light. So if I do it here, it's going to go all for the light and I lose some of the darks. I want something in between. Sort of like bracketing the shot in the old terminology. not too bad. The paper itself does warble a little bit, and I've noticed people, when they've taken pictures, if I only have one light on this thing, I'll get it dark on one side and I'll see more of the wrinkles. If you hit it with two lights on either side, you'll have less trouble with the wrinkles. You got to have enough light on it. If there's not enough light, it comes out dark and gray with no contrast. So all this stuff is important, although people don't take it that seriously because they think, I don't know why the people don't take it that seriously. You guys tell me. Do you think this is important? I think it's important. So I'm going to send that to myself. I'm going to go to my downloads. And here's my other. That's more evenly lit. You can see just in the preview how it's hot on the left. This one's more evenly lit. So open that in Photoshop. And I've got my original here. And I've got my image here. It's a little bit off here because this paper is rising up a little bit. Not enough to worry about. You want to make sure that you don't have a major keyframing thing going on. Okay. Now, what is the first thing that we do? First thing we do is we crop it. So you use your crop tool and you bring it down to get rid of the edges. If it's a little crooked like that, you can even twist it at this point to line it up a little bit better. That's a little not perfect. I probably should reshoot it. But it's not hugely distorted. I want to keep it as undistorted as possible. So we'll get rid of all that schmutz because we don't need it. We'll get rid of all this extra space. We don't need any of those extra pixels. They just take up space. So crop it nicely, frame it, vignette it in a way. You can even, if you really want it to be pretty, I would crop this all the way down to crop out the black. And then you've got a really nice little trim and a really nice frame. But I want to keep and for this particular assignment, it was required that we do a gradient. So the gradient's got to stay in there. You guys remember this from observational drawing, right? Okay, so I'm looking at the drawing. I'm making sure that this looks like it's straight. You got to have a discerning eye. Don't be shy to make it perfect. All right, so that's cropped. Now that I've cropped it, I want to brighten it because it's a little bit yellow. One of the reasons why pictures tend to come out yellow is most of us have still a lot of incandescent lighting in our houses. If you're taking it inside, if you don't want that, if you want to avoid that yellowing of the photograph, then you need to take it outside under natural light or under a full spectrum light, or have a filter on your camera, which they used to do all the time. You can compensate for it in your camera sometimes for indoor lighting. It's showing me at 25% of its original right now, so I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. Now it's at 50% of its original, so it's still way too big. But that's okay. So we're going to go to Image, Adjust Hue and Saturation, and take out the yellow. Much more like the original now, because it is charcoal on white paper. Okay. Now I'm going to, the levels look pretty good. I can see the dark side and the reflected light and the light, and it's got a really good balance. So just for kicks, I'm going to take a look at the levels to see what we've got. It's pretty well balanced. If you have it so that it spikes all in the middle or all on one side or the other side, the balance of light isn't good on your image. You may consider retaking the image. You can try to adjust it. Like if you're doing 30 gesture drawings, you may not want to be this picky on each one. So that's too much. That's knocking out too much of my detail in the background. So have a discerning eye. And you can shift the middle bit up and down a little bit. You want to get a good representation of the work. And I've got the real work right here to compare it to. So we want to make it look as close to what you're actually seeing as you possibly can. Once I've done the trimming, the color adjustment, and the brightness and contrast adjustment, if necessary, then I'll do the size adjustment. I could save an intermediate step here, which I recommend in case you need to go back to the large image for some reason. Besides, you should always save and save often. I'm going to go ahead and save it. Even though I'm saving it as a JPEG, I'm still going to save it in my drawings. I do save the JPEGs a lot. And I save the TIFFs when I scan it, the JPEGs when I photograph it. And I'm going to call this break an egg. So that's saving it as a large file. It's 2.2 megabytes. When I look at the actual image size under Photoshop, image size, you can see that it's 1900 by 2600 pixels. The actual size of the file in its raw form, Photoshop form, is 14 megabytes. That's a lot. If I were to print this out at 72 dpi, it's going to be 26 by 36 inches. Way too much, right? So we want to constrain proportions. We want to, it's already at 72 dpi because it's a JPEG. The JPEGs automatically will convert your image to 72 dpi. If this had been at 300 dpi, I can't do it backwards like that. I can't do the math. Then the pixels would be a lot higher. Let's just stick with JPEG, with the 72 dpi. Usually if it's at 300 dpi or 150 and you change the resolution to 72, it will automatically drop the pixels so that you're well within the limit. So that might be all you have to do. If you still have a high end, take the biggest number and drop it down to 1,000 or less. Now you see the image is more like 10 by 13, which is what this actually is. I'm going to go ahead and take it to 800. And now we've got an 8.5 by 11, 8 by 11. So that's perfect. So we say OK. And now when I display it at 100% on my screen, it looks about the same as my actual drawing. So that's good. Now we want to save this for our submission. And in this class, in 102, we submit most things as PDFs, right? Once you've got this saved, all this work down to its proper view so it looks good, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to save this as, and I'm not going to save it in my portfolio folder. Keeping your folders reasonably organized is going to really help you a lot. I'm going to put it into this class's live section and save. So it doesn't matter what I call it at this point because it's my file and I haven't made a PDF out of it. So that is it for the Photoshop. Now there are already some demos in the classroom on Photoshop preferences. If you're having problems making Photoshop do what you want it to do, let me know. I will walk you through your preferences. We can share screens and I can help you get things set up because you can set up your workspace in Photoshop to be exactly the way that you want it for how you work so that all these things are where they're supposed to be. All right. So now I'm going to go to Acrobat. Now this is for submission. When you're in Acrobat, I said I would use Creative Cloud, didn't I? So I'm not going to use Acrobat Pro, X Pro, which is infinitely better. I will go ahead and use the Creative Cloud version of Acrobat. Oh, this one here, Acrobat DC. Okay. Quite a different interface, probably more similar to the ones that you have. Now, there's a lot of preferences that you can set in how your Photoshop opens up If you go under Preferences, it's here on a Mac, and it's at the bottom of the File menu for the PC. There's lots of cool things that you can turn off that they want you to think that, you know, to be. This is just annoying. So usually it automatically has it set up so that it shows this weird start screen and it shows a bunch of stuff you don't need. So go through all of your preferences and just check and see what your settings are defaulted to. You may want to change them. Oh, here's General. So Open Documents as new tabs in the same window. I hate that. And I hate documents in tabs. Show home screen when all documents are closed. That is the default. I don't like that either. I just want it to open up in Photoshop or in Acrobat. So anyway, you may want to check your preferences. You want to get to a point where you've got your home and you've got your tools. So we go to Tools and we say Combine Files. Click on that. Now we're going to add the files. So we can either click and drag, or we can click on it and go hunting for it. So I will go to my Live section, and I'll put this one in. Oh, I don't like that either. I like to see it in a list, because then I can see how big is it, how many pages is it, when was it made, what's its name, et cetera, et cetera. I much prefer the details version rather than the icon version. The icon version, if you click on it like this, it'll show you what's in there, but I would rather see it. All right, so I'm going to put Break an Egg in there, like so. I'm not going to put that one in there, but I will put, I'll put this foot in there. That's already a PDF, so that makes it harder. Actually, this is a bunch of my anatomy drawings. That makes it harder because I don't know how big each image is without opening up the file. So I don't necessarily want to do that. Let's see, I could put a document in there that we can add somebody else's introduction. Let's see, what else could I put in there? Let's see if somebody has a JPEG. Yeah, here's a JPEG. Oh, that's a photo. That's a photo. That is not very clear. Yeah, this is too big. You see, it's 2500 by 3500. This one here, it's better, but not perfect. It's dark and gray, and it looks like it's, well, I can go through some of these ones that aren't quite right and show you how to which one, where they would have to be fixed. Okay. All right, like this one's pretty yellow. We'll just go with these two. So once you get all 30 or 40 or 50 of them in there, then you combine files. When you combine the files, come on, computer, you should have an option to make them smaller. I'm not sure how to do this on here. There's under here. Here you go. Under Options, you have, if you're having problems getting your files small enough, if you've got like 30 files and they're all at 500K, you may want to choose the smaller, more compressed version. I usually go with the middle. Do not save it as a PDF portfolio. So combine. Now I can look at my document by scrolling through the two images here. You can look at it all on one page, or you can look at it as a scrolling thing. I would rather see it one page, and then I can scroll down. So if you've got one long strip, somebody turned in one long strip, yeah, and that's not good. That takes up more space, it's less efficient, and it's just not, it's not right. You got to do it this way. If you choose, say you need to put in the time that you spent on each drawing because it doesn't show up, you cropped it off or whatever, you can add text in Acrobat DC. Go to Tools, and I really don't like this version of this program, but I will sort it out anyway. Let's see where the tools are. could put it in as a comment. That's probably the best way to do it. Yeah. We will use a comment. Okay, so now I get these tools up here. And I just want to make a text box. And probably big enough to see it. Oh, now it's got to move, get out of the way. And I'm going to say, how long did I spend on this? I spent 60 minutes, I believe. So this is a 60-minute drawing. You can format your text box. I think properties will do it. Yep, we can turn off the border, make it no border. Not that way. Style, no border. That gets rid of the border. You can have a fill color. You can have opacity. You can make it like transparent or whatever. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that you can do to it. All this stuff will make it, you know, just more bells and whistles. Now there won't be, it's whiter than the background. You could even center it in there. But at least I can go back and change it, make it a little bit bigger. Let's make it 20. There. So there's my 60-minute drawing. This one was probably a 45-minute drawing, so I could do the same. I might put my text box down here and say for text box. Oops, sorry. I'm not used to using this one particular program. Everyone is different. So text box and draw the text box. Nope, that's not it. It's not giving me that special little fancy there. That's what I'm looking for. And we're going to put 45 minutes in there. And we're going to remove the border. No border. I'm going to make this default. Okay. Okay, so now that one has no border either. Once I've got that all set up and everything's ready to go, and I double check it, make sure that everything is nice and clean, exactly the way I want it, then I'm going to go to Save, File, Save as, save as a PDF. And in this particular program, I don't want to save it in a recent folder. I want to save it in my computer, so I have to choose a different folder. It's going to have to think about it. Oh, this is just aggravating. I really don't like Creative Cloud. If you can get a hold of a copy of Acrobat Pro X, I would do it. It costs more money, but it's better. So this is going to be Stanley. Oh, great. I broke my keyboard again. Okay. Let's try that again. File, save as, choose a different folder. I want to save it in Live. I'm going to save this as Stanley _N _ MAAA102 _sample. Okay. Now before I go posting that, I want to check it. So I'm going to go to that folder. And take a look at it. It's 700K, that's good. It's got the right file name, that's good. There's 2 images in it, that's good. Good to go. I can post it, and I can be reasonably assured that the math professor is not going to scream at me about oversized files or ugly yellow or weird colors and all that kind of good stuff. Alrighty, now close. Any questions on that? I know this is kind of weird and convoluted, but this is how it works. Good to go. Okay, great. What's next on my list? So we photographed or scanned it, trimmed it, cropped it, adjusted color, contrast, and resolution, sized it correctly, best practices for saving, proper format for submission. Okay, so now we're going to talk specifically, we've got that all done, we're going to talk specifically about the project.